Welcome to the Penny Z Show, where you get to learn how real people overcame real issues. Get ready to take notes and, most importantly, take action. Here's your host, Penny Z.
Well, welcome to the Penny Z Show, where we are focusing on transforming lives one life at a time, where our topics are real, relevant, and relatable. Today on the Penny Z Show, I'm excited to introduce a great friend of mine that we've met about a little over 2 years ago in a life coaching organization. Mitch and his lovely wife have been a part of my life for well over 2 years, have seen some of the ups and downs in my life, and have been extremely inspirational for me in starting this journey and starting a complete different path for me. So I'm excited to introduce Mitch and have him on our show. The series is, as you know, we're talking about the less than movement. But before we get into that with Mitch, I'm just going to have him introduce himself real quick and give him a kind of a brief bio on who Mitch is. So welcome to the show, Mitch. Thanks.
Thank you, Penny. It's a pleasure to be here. I will say that I'm having to resist the urge to pick my nose. Maybe I should just go ahead and get out of the way now and pick it, and so everybody can see it. But at any rate, let me maybe they'll cut that part out. Let me just give a brief biography and give you my story in a nutshell. I am a native New Yorker, born and raised, and always wanted to be an engineer like my dad. So went to high school, went to the mecca of engineering, Nerd Central, MIT, got an engineering degree in electrical engineering, and it was sponsored by, I had a scholarship from AT&T Bell Laboratories. So when I left MIT, I went to Bell Labs and worked for about 7 years as an engineer. Enjoyed it, but always felt that I was ready for more. Most engineers don't get an opportunity to interact with people a lot. They kind of shove stuff under the door that you work on and don't let you talk to other people. And I discovered that I kind of like people. I like interacting with folks. It makes me happy to help people solve their problems. And so right around the early 90s, I left AT&T. I also left New York, New Jersey area, came to Atlanta, and started a business, one of a series of businesses that gave me more interaction with people. Fast forward to about 2000, I started doing real estate, which is what I do now. And since about 99, 2000, I've been working with my lovely wife as a real estate investor, and I love it. And I'm excited to help other people solve their real estate and life problems with the skills that I've learned.
Well, your background is fantastic. Obviously, a very smart individual, not only with your engineering degree and your MIT degree, but also with real estate. I know that you have helped me tremendously with business coaching and business development. And so I'm just really excited, and I thank you again for being here and for sharing a little bit about your background. Mitch has done a fantastic, Mitch and his wife has a fantastic career in real estate. They are the two nicest but most professional people that you can ever meet. So I will just give you a shout out that anyone in the greater Atlanta area, and he might even be expanding outside of that, who's looking to do a real estate deal, I will give you a shout out, as well as any kind of brainstorming on business development and business coaching. Mitch and his wife are just fantastic. So I'm excited to have you here. And I know we all have a backstory. Well, good. We all have a backstory. And as wonderful as we all are, there's always things in our past that make us feel less than in our life. And sometimes it's just for a brief moment. Sometimes, as I call it, it's for a season. And sometimes, as it is for myself, it was for about 44 years of my life. And so I am interviewing people on the Penny Z Show to share different experiences in what I'm calling the less than movement. And my goal is not only for us to be able to be relatable, because I think there are going to be people that are listening, Mitch, that are going to understand and feel your experience, but also by the end of our show, to help giving them some tools or some action steps that you experience that we can at least start sending them in a direction to help to transform their life. So what I'd like to start is just to start with your backstory and just to hear a little bit about what you consider is one of your less than stories for your life?
Well, interestingly enough, the biggest or the less than story that came first to mind is in fact regarding MIT, because it is if you're trying to be an engineer in the United States, it's pretty much, with perhaps the possible exception of Caltech, pretty much the place that you want to go. And I was a city kid in New York, never had been to Cambridge, which is where MIT is. So, and I went there sight unseen. So I didn't know much about the school except that it was the best, and I got in, so I was going to go. So I hopped on a plane and landed in. Yeah, it was. However, it was devastating. Is probably pretty close to accurate in the sense that you quickly figure out that while you may have been hot stuff in high school, and I went to a pretty prestigious high school, so I wasn't even hot stuff there. But at MIT, you meet people. I met people who were brilliant. I mean, capital B, brilliant, and not just one or two of them. It's like a whole school full of them. And so, while I realize in retrospect that while I enjoyed aspects of engineering, I am not a hardcore engineer. I know some hardcore engineers, and I respect them, but that's not what I enjoy doing. And so while the background was useful, at the time, you are pitted against, because it's extremely competitive, you're pitted against all the other people in your school, many of whom this is all they want to do ever in life is equations and design circuits and such. And that really wasn't, even back then, I suspected that wasn't what I really wanted to do. But at that time, you're thrown into this highly competitive situation, and I felt visibly like I was coming up short. I was not by any stretch the brightest of my class. I'm probably the bottom portion of the class that made the top portion possible, I guess is the way you describe it. And so for the first year of MIT, at least back then, I'm not sure if it's still now, is pass-fail. So that first year, they try to let off some of the pressure by making it such that you only can either pass or fail a class. There's no letter grades. And I think I pretty much passed everything, barely. But it became clear to me that I was outgunned, severely outgunned. And that's pretty devastating, because this is pretty much all I wanted in my life, was to be an engineer. And I wanted to be a good engineer. And so seeing how brilliant some of these folks were was a harsh dose of reality about what the rest of my life was going to look like. And that took me down several pegs. And I wish I could say that I recovered sometime during my 4 years at MIT. I did not. I graduated. I survived. But it wasn't until well after that experience that I kind of got my legs back up underneath me and had a better understanding of what I really was destined for, and didn't feel quite as badly about my experience. I appreciate it. I wouldn't do it again, but I appreciated the experience and getting to meet brilliant people and know who they are, and be able to pick up the phone and call them. But that really wasn't my thing, and I didn't know it back then. So I spent pretty much the entire 4 years of MIT clearly feeling less than most of my classmates. There were a few areas where I could kind of hold my own, but I didn't live, breathe, eat, sleep, and drink code or equations and such. And unless you do that, it's really hard to be competitive in that environment. I had bigger things in store for myself. I just didn't know it at the time.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. I mean, I know I can think back and even talking to some of my high school friends, like at our first or our 10-year class reunion, and some of them saying exactly what you said. They were the hot stuff, so to speak, whether it was because they were smart in school and doing great with, getting A's and B's and just very brilliant in high school, or whether they were jocks in the world of sports and no one could touch them, and then going into college and feeling that less than, and now you've got people coming from other areas of the country, possibly other areas of the world and
Yep.
other schools, And, you might have been the best in your school, but now you have all this other competition. And
That's
I
right.
remember having conversations at my class reunion, how several, especially the men I found, felt less than. They felt devastated. They didn't feel they were good enough. And now they have all this additional competition and the pressure that was put on them. What can you share during those 4 years that you were experiencing, and how exactly did you identify that was happening to you?
Got it. So because I was in an academic environment, the bottom line is test scores, is grades. And, if you're getting the great grade, so most schools like MIT, they grade on a curve, the infamous curve, which means, if the highest score on the test is a 55, then that's an A. And if you scored, 12, that's probably a C or D. So the tests are designed so that no one is going to get 100. You'd have to be Einstein to get 100. And they intentionally set this up this way, so that the tests are set up so that it's going to be almost impossible for anybody to get 100%.
So did they kind of set you up to fail to some extent, or
well,
what did you feel about that process?
They set you up to compete. It is definitely, and because it's graded on a curve, it means that if you don't keep up with the median, with the average student, then you're going to fail, or you're likely to fail. And so if the bulk of your class is getting better and you're not, then you're left behind. After that first year, so the first year is pass fail, and then you're thrown right into the mix in sophomore year, and that's when, sad to say, MIT and most schools like it have a fairly high rate of suicide among, in our case, not freshmen, because you get pass fail for freshman year. So okay, they move it to sophomore year. So now you have sophomores who have never gotten a C in their lives. Fortunately for me, I had inoculated myself with the occasional, well, I don't think I got a lot of C's in high school, but maybe a B. But I knew people who went through their entire high school career without getting anything less than an A, ever. And so when you grade on a curve, you're going to get a C. There's just no way around it. And so there were people who had never experienced that, and it broke them. That wasn't me. I was okay with not being the top grade in the class. But it just got dark all of a sudden. Are you still seeing me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. But my experience was that I didn't, and this is kind of something that followed me right up until the coaching. I didn't at that time know how to ask for help. That's probably my biggest mistake. It's probably not, I don't think I was any less prepared than the average student. What I didn't discover until well after I graduated from MIT is that there were resources like old exams and old problem sets that you could have just asked for and gone and reviewed what the previous class or the previous year's class had done. And that's a huge leg up. I didn't discover that until I was darn near a senior that existed. And if I had asked someone about that, I probably could have gotten the answer. But I did not, because I thought that everybody else seemed to be figuring this out on their own. I should figure it out on my own as well. So that's one lesson that I've learned that I carry with me today is if you find yourself drowning, ask for help. Let the ego go. No one is served by someone drowning in work, and so there is no loss of faith in saying, "Hey, look, I don't understand how this works. What are the resources that are available to me so that I can get up to speed faster, so that I can catch on?" I didn't ask, and no one volunteered because it was fairly competitive. No one was going to suggest it, but I could have asked, and I suspect if I had asked enough people, I would have gotten an answer. I didn't. I went to MIT young. I went to college at 17, so I was a year younger than almost all of my. Well, not all. I knew a kid that was at 14 going to MIT at the time. So I wasn't the youngest kid, but I was young enough that I didn't have a lot of the social skills that would make one comfortable to ask for help and to interact with other people. I was fairly young. I was a year younger than most of my peers. So that's something that prevented me, I think, from asking for help. But The one lesson I will certainly encourage people to take away from my experience is that there is no shame in asking for help. And in fact, asking for help, and we talk about this all the time in our coaching, asking for help gives other people an opportunity to gift to you the answer, or at least resources and help. And it makes both parties feel good. You're not, if you're asking the right person, you're not imposing on them. They're happy to help, but you've got to ask because they can't read your mind. And so that's one thing that I didn't do then. I try to do more now, and that explained a lot of the unpleasantness that I experienced. It was just because I didn't ask for assistance. No one there. I wasn't hazed. They didn't. It wasn't an unpleasant experience. I did find something that I enjoyed. It ended up being fencing. I joined the fencing team, which I had done a little bit in high school, but not extensively. And that gave me a support group and folks that I could hang out with. And it gave me an opportunity to do something, to excel at something that wasn't academic, but still be able to, represent MIT. So I enjoyed that. So I found something that I was good at to get a little bit more confidence. And well after MIT, I since learned the virtue of asking people for help, recognizing that rarely is it the case that you're the only one. We all think we're the only one that has that experience, and maybe that's I'm sure that's one of the underlying themes of the less than movement, is everybody thinks that they're the only one that feels like that. And there's a name for it, the imposter syndrome. I got here, it was a mistake that I got here, and I'm not really worthy, and eventually they're all going to find out, and I'm going to get kicked out and sent back home. Well, we all at any given moment feel that way, and because we don't share that experience, it's that secret that, frankly, all of us are feeling. And if we shared it, we would realize that it's not just us. Everybody feels that way at one time or another. Those 4 years were my time, where I felt less than, I felt isolated. I had friends, but even the friends that you have, you're competing with them. If you're taking the same class they're taking, that curve still exists. And if they scored, in the 80s and you scored in the 60s, then, too bad for you. So I think that there are a few lessons that I pulled out, but those are some of the ones, some of the tools also that I use to kind of self-correct from that experience.
And after college, how did that affect you? Did it affect you as far as job interviews, self-confidence? What happened once you went out of college? How did that affect you, and how did you identify this? At what age? Was it during college? So now you're sharing that with us, or at what point did you identify that process that you went through, and how did it affect you immediately after college?
Got it. So in my case, because I had this engineering scholarship, part of that, the one of the terms of that scholarship is that in the summers you would work for AT&T Bell Labs. So the summer before I started at MIT, summer before I started at MIT, I went to AT&T and worked there for the summer. Then I went to MIT, and so that helped quite a bit because there are a ton of bright people at AT&T Bell Labs, at least at the time. AT&T Bell Labs was one of the prestigious research institutions in the country, and so getting an opportunity to interact with folks like that outside of the school environment, that just in the actual work world, and being able to hold my own, and that to the extent that a 16-year-old is able to, or 17-year-old is able to do that. The opportunity to have that experience, I think, helped my confidence. It helped my sense of self. I was able to contribute on the team, and so I didn't feel like a total loser because I had at least that experience. And then I'd go back to MIT, and I'd struggle through my courses. And then in the summertime, I had a reprieve. I had an opportunity to go work at this glorious institution. So that helped. Also, and I hate to say it, but I'm old enough that back in the mid-'80s, computer science was a thing, but it wasn't really a thing. MIT at the time had just, in the recent years, had just started a computer science program. So I know I'm dating myself horribly, but what that means is, if I knew then what I know now, I would have probably gone to get a computer science degree rather than engineering. It was available to me at the time, but it wasn't seen as, I hate to say it, but it wasn't seen as serious. Engineering was seen as a serious thing. Computer science was kind of a flash in the pan. We're not sure if this is going to last. Now, of course, we can laugh at that because computer science went on to be a pretty big deal. But at the time, generally speaking, engineering was seen as a more solid career. Being an engineer was a bigger deal than being a software person. I think they both got the Bachelor of Science degree, but there was a stigma associated with computer science because it was still fairly new, and there weren't a lot of opportunities to use it. It was just getting started. It was before the PC, before computers blew up. So it was a bit of a risky move. So knowing what I know now, I should have shifted out of engineering. I mean, I studied things like quantum mechanics and electro-quasi-statics, and I never, ever used that even when I went to AT&T. So a lot of that stuff was there just because that's the traditional engineering background, but I didn't enjoy it. And because I didn't enjoy it, I didn't do well at it. And that led to the spiral down of, wow, gosh, this is not for me. I must not be any good. I'm not smart. I can't get this stuff done. So having the AT&T experience, I think, gave me a little bit of balance just to see what was going to happen once I got out, because I was working with actual engineers, and I realized that most of the stuff that I was studying at MIT wasn't really going to be all that relevant for what I wanted to do. In the mid-'80s, networking was just becoming a thing. There was no internet in 1985. Well, there was an ARPANET, but there was no actual internet. There was certainly no World Wide Web. So it was still the early days of a lot of that technology, but it was clear to me that networking was kind of where I was gravitating toward, and that didn't require a lot of the stuff I was taking and not doing well at MIT. So I think I started, over the 4 years, I started to realize that, yeah, this isn't exactly what I enjoy doing, and I'm not really doing all that great at it, but it matters less and less because what I really want to do, A, they're not teaching all that much at the undergraduate level at MIT, and B, I'm going to get that when I get out of here and get to work and maybe go to grad school. I can kind of get all that stuff at that point. So I just need to survive MIT, get through this with my ego not intact, or at least mostly intact, and just hold my nose and hope for the best, which is what I did. I graduated by the skin of my teeth and went off to AT&T. I didn't have to interview. So when I left MIT, I had a ready-made job. Well, they had seen me for 4 years. They liked what they saw. They now had a graduate, and so I got a job offer. I never had to interview at all. I went right to Bell Labs after graduating from MIT. And in the AT&T program, it's a wonderful program that doesn't exist anymore. But in that program, you're not promised a job, but unless you screw things up, the odds are pretty good that you're going to get a job from the group that you've been working with. So I went to work for AT&T full time, and then AT&T has a program for its new hires that allows you they'll pay for grad school. And so that sounded pretty good to me. So I applied for grad school and I got in, and I went to University of Southern California for a year to get a graduate degree in engineering that AT&T paid for. And then for that degree, I felt it was a completely different experience. It's California instead of Massachusetts, so sun instead of snow, but also I had a lot more confidence. I knew what I wanted to do. My specialty was networking, computer networks, which was not the traditional engineering stuff that I didn't do well at MIT. It wasn't, random variables and hydraulics and quasi-statics and such. It was networks and, tokens and Ethernet and that kind of stuff. And that was a lot more up my alley, so I did much better at that and had a much more enjoyable time. And so that's around the time that I figured out, I probably shouldn't have done this engineering stuff at MIT, but hey, it's done now. I'll just kind of roll with it and move forward. So grad school, I won't say it cured it, but it made me feel a whole lot less than because I did succeed. I did achieve. I was competitive with my peers. And while I'm glad for the MIT experience, it was nice to have the cherry on top be University of Southern California.
Yeah, and it sounds like something else to help with that confidence and also for direction. What I hear from you and what you're saying with your less than story is, for those people that are experiencing devastation because of being in a situation of competitiveness,
Yep.
and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like that was the big deal going in as a freshman and then obviously continuing through the 4 years. So whether it's through academia or it's going into a new job or perhaps even in sports, feeling that devastation and having a way to build your self-confidence during that, whether it is either asking for help or whether it's having outside sources, family, friends, or a mentor, someone outside of that world to be able to support you, help you with your self-confidence. And the other thing that I heard was to really follow your passion and follow your dream. You went into MIT with an engineering, but once you found out about the computer science option, that sounded like that would be a better avenue or better road for you. Yet so many of us don't take that avenue. We take the safe road, or we take the road that is expected, or, you know, that our family wants us to do, or other people encourage us to do. So I'm hearing a couple of different things from you. Hearing, make sure to ask for help, make sure to have a support group that helps with your self-confidence, whatever that might look like, as well as follow your passion and follow your dream, whether it's a career or outside of that. Is that fair
absolutely.
To say?
Absolutely. While I'm grateful to MIT largely because part of me suspects I was on my way to being an insufferable, arrogant jerk pre-MIT.
Not you, Mitch. No.
Yeah. Well,
I've never met that Mitch.
You're saying Mitch 2.0, possibly 3.0. Mitch 1.0 might have been a little bit cocky. I think if you ask my family, I may have been a little bit full of myself when I went to MIT. And so, to some extent, I'm actually, you know, if I were advising someone, it's kind of nice to be taken down a peg or two, as long as it's not permanent. I don't think my spirit was not crushed, but I got to see what brilliance looks like, and I got to feel what it's like to not to have something come easy. I think for the most part, high school came easily to me. Doing well in high school. I mean, again, I was not valedictorian, but I didn't feel like I couldn't keep up in high school.
You're very lucky. Academia was not my friend. I struggled.
Yeah,
I was one of those who struggled in high school and struggled in college, but I made it.
Well, and I won't say that. I mean, again, I went to a pretty sizable high school. My graduating high school class was 1,000 people. It was pretty good size, but it was not. It was not the hardest thing I've ever done. It was not the easiest, but it was not as hard as MIT because MIT was just, for the most part, it's just techies, it's just engineers, and everybody's trying to do pretty much the same thing. And so you're competing against people who live, breathe, eat, sleep, and drink this stuff. And even back then, that wasn't me. I had a bigger vision of what I wanted to do. I didn't know what it was, but I had a bigger vision for what I wanted to do. So yeah, I agree with you that asking for help, using the tools that are available to you, or that you can find that will help you get your legs underneath you, are a big part of it. Pursuing your passion is a big part of it. Certainly, I recognize now that one's willingness to endure is a lot greater when you're doing something that you love anyway. And we often do things because we think it's the right. I mean, I picked MIT because I went to I think Peterson's has a guide of colleges and universities, and I looked to see what was number one for engineering, and it was MIT. And so I said, well, that's where I want to go. And it wasn't a foregone conclusion that I would get in, but I at least set that up as my objective. And so I didn't pick it because I thought it'd be a great place to go from a social standpoint. And I didn't pick it because it was a nice climate. I picked it for one reason and one reason only, and that's probably not the reason to pick a four-year university experience. I didn't know. I mean, I was the first in my family to go away to college. My parents went to college after the fact as adults, but no one had gone to college. No one had gone away to college. I don't recall at the time. My brother's older, so maybe I'm getting that mixed up. But anyway, my point is, it wasn't like I had a lot of experience to draw on when I decided to pick a college. I picked one. My parents had very little input into what I did, and I pretty much did what other people in my high school were doing who were doing engineering. And so now, as an adult, when people ask me about college choices or what should they do, I encourage them to be very, very mindful of the fact that, A, most students don't get into the college of their choice, and yet B, most students have a pretty decent college experience. So even if you don't get into the college of your choice, it's not as big a disaster as you think it is when you're 17, 18. We typically, make it work no matter where we go. We build a community around ourselves, but don't go someplace that doesn't have anything that you think you're going to like, because if you don't have an opportunity to study something that you enjoy, it's going to be misery all the way through. I enjoyed technical things. Even now, I think I'm a little bit of a nerd, but I don't want to do that for a living. I use those skills to solve problems for my clients, but you wouldn't want me building you a network or designing a television system. But I'd be happy to help you solve a real estate problem using the analytical tools that I picked up as an engineer. I do think that, and I think it is, well, first I'll say straight up that there were not a lot of women at MIT when I was there. I think it was like 5-to-1 ratio of men to women. So but my gut tells me that you're probably right, that historically men have a harder time asking for help than women. And so when you have a college that's full of guys and the testosterone's flying, asking for help feels like weakness. And no one wants to appear weak, and so we don't ask for help. Everybody's toughing it out. And so, I suspect that I have no doubt that I was not the only person that went to MIT and felt like they were less than at any given point, running up against somebody that was just light years beyond them and not being able to compete. So in retrospect, I don't regret the experience. It has shaped me. It shaped who I am. It shaped what I did for a good portion of my life. And I'm glad for the experience, but I now know that, yes, I want to focus on my passion. I don't want to spend a minute of my life or a minute of the rest of my life doing anything that I don't absolutely love doing. I want to be around people that I enjoy being with. I have a very specific idea of what that looks like. I like people who love to learn. And so it's my responsibility to put myself in those environments. And I'm a lot less, I think, competitive in the sense, while I want to achieve, I realize that the goal in life is not to score the top grade. The goal in life is to help as many people as you can and to have as much of a meaningful, authentic life as you can. And there's no scorecard for that, or at least if it is, you get to create it. And so if you live your life grading yourself on a curve compared to everybody else, you're almost always going to be happy because someone's going to have more than you in any situation. The goal is to figure out what makes you happy, what you enjoy doing, and do that thing and not worry so much about what other people are doing. And I think when you do that, it's harder to feel less than. When you're doing what you are built to do, what you're meant to do, you're not worried about what other people are thinking or feeling about you. You're just doing your thing. And I think it's harder for guys to do that. I think, not to borrow a theme that I've had in the past, I think it's also why it's hard for guys to dance. I think they're related. This whole notion of, I don't care what other people are saying, I'm just going to do what I feel like doing, what feels good to me, is why I think many guys don't want to dance, because, what will the guys say? Well, when you start worrying about what the guys say, I think is when success really comes to you, real success, in my opinion. So, yeah, I think that experience, fortunately, it didn't crush my spirit. Fortunately, while it was unpleasant at the time, I can look back on it now and kind of chuckle, because I have found the thing that I enjoy doing, and I could probably have benefited from having my ego slapped down a little bit at that time. So in all, it probably worked out okay, but it did give me some life lessons that I carry with me today. I'm a lot slower to judge people who are still finding their legs, because I realize that everybody has a story and everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and it's just about paying attention enough, caring enough to figure out what those are, and listening to their story and learning the lesson. That it's not about the external grade, it's about the grade that we give ourselves. And as a side note, I know lots of people who were brilliant at MIT, who graduated top of their class, who went off to the business world and knocked them dead, who got downsized and outsourced just like the rest of us because of technology. And there's some kid in India or Pakistan who can do the exact same thing you're doing for a tenth the price. So even those folks, even those MIT geniuses, didn't have completely bulletproof armor against life. So, and in retrospect, I'm pretty sure that if I had stayed an engineer for my entire career, I'd have gotten outsourced at least half a dozen times by now. I left AT&T voluntarily in the early 90s and didn't look back, but I know lots of my colleagues who got laid off from that job and then went to someplace else and they got laid off there. And so I'm glad I'm not relying entirely on my technical skills, because I now, of course, recognize that technical skills are great, but the soft skills are just as important, if not these days more important. And MIT taught me none of that. I graduated from MIT with hardly any social skills taught to me by the university. And so I'm glad that I was able to get out and live in the real world and interact with people and learn some of those skills myself, and educate myself on what I needed to have to move forward. The number one skill that MIT, I think, prides themselves on teaching their students is not a particular, and I didn't know this at the time, I know this now, it's not a particular subject, but it's the ability to learn. They try to teach you, they throw all that stuff at you to give you practice building a methodology for learning new things. And that's one of the things I've learned that I'm good at, is that you give me a challenge and a body of knowledge, and in a week or two, I won't be an expert, but at least I'll be knowledgeable enough to start having an intelligent conversation about it. And that's a skill that I learned, if you will, over time as a result of my MIT experience. The technical stuff that I learned back then was irrelevant 5 years after I graduated. So that stuff was old back in the 90s. And so relying on the information is not useful. What I rely on is my ability to get up to speed quickly on things that I know nothing about today. I know nothing about, vacation rentals, but I know how to approach the subject so that I can learn about it a month from now. And that's something that I carry with me as valuable from that experience.
That's fantastic. Well, much like what you learned at MIT and how to learn, the Penny Z Show and what we're trying to do is not only try to inspire people to learn, but inspire people to transform their lives. But as we know, it comes from the inside out, and it comes from the personal side, not the professional side. So Your story is absolutely amazing. It was touching on so many different areas that I could have. We've got probably about 3 more shows that we could talk about when you talk about weakness and competitiveness, and the fact that men and some of the challenges that men have in this world and what society puts on us. So I just appreciate you sharing your story. I know that there is a lot of people that are out there that have felt what you have felt when it comes to devastation and the competition and feeling less than and not being good enough. And yet you have helped us tell your story in a way that is providing people with inspiration. It's providing people with some tools and some action steps and some ways so that they do not stay stuck or they do not stay less than if they're in a particular or in a similar situation like your situation is, Mitch. So I just thank you very much for your time. We're going to wrap up here. So if there's any last minute advice or anything you'd like to share with our audience, I'd like to just ask you to finish off with that.
Sure. Well, first I'll apologize for the background noise. I am standing outside in the heat, so I'm actually melting here. But I did want to say, no, it's not your fault.
I don't hear the noise at all.
Oh, good. But people will probably see me perspiring here. I did want to say that I think it is a brilliant thing that you're doing, getting people to talk about their less than stories. It's not something that gets talked about often. It's the thing that people take to their grave, that opportunity or that moment in their life where they felt less than. I think what you're doing is a true service to people. And I think as we take away the stigma of talking about this subject, I think people will have an opportunity to heal and take the lessons from various people as to how they got over their particular feeling of less than, which I know is your goal. But I just think it's an awesome undertaking that you've made, and it's really, really valuable, and I appreciate you doing it. And I'm happy to be a tiny part of it. I feel like I talked a whole lot, but hopefully there's some useful pieces in there for people to take away.
Well, first off, thank you. You took the words out of my mouth in the sense that when we share our stories And when we are able to verbalize them, it's amazing transformation just to have that outside of our bodies, and to be able to share that. And once you do start telling your stories and other people feel that and can understand those stories, it's amazing the power that's behind it, not only in kind of letting your guard down, letting the walls come down, letting healing processes start if they haven't already. And so I just really appreciate, you being on the show and helping us with another avenue and another story to help our viewers. So thank you very much, Mitch. I appreciate your time. And
My
thanks
pleasure.
everyone for listening to the Penny Z Show, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much for listening. If you want to hear more, including specific ways to empower yourself, go to thepennyzshow.com.